Olá, boa noite a todas e todos. É um grande prazer estar aqui com vocês neste evento Talking Business, Talento,
Hello,
Tecnologia
good
e
evening,
Televisão.
everyone. It's a pleasure to
Como
be
se
here with
preparar
you
e
with
projetar
this talking
internacionalmente.
business, talent,
Não
technology, and television,
deixe
how
de
to prepare
iniciar
and
por
project ourselves
agradecer as diversas escolas
internationally.
e Uninter
Before
desta
we
parceria
start, I'd
aberta que
like to
resulta
thank all
nos
Uninter
eventos
schools
Talking
and this
Business.
internal partnership that
E
result
neste
into
dia
this
temos duas
talking
pessoas
business event.
especiais
Today,
conosco.
we have
Vamos
two very
aprender da
special people with
experiência de
us.
um
You're going to learn
brasileiro
from the experience
que
of a
se mudou dos
Brazilian
Estados Unidos em meados dos anos
who moved to
90,
the US
ficou entre os
during the
70
90s.
executivos mais seniors da
He
IBM.
was
Ele já tem
among
mais de
the
300 mil
70 most
funcionários
senior
e
executives at
agora ele
IBM, a
está num
company with more
programa
than
bem interessante na Universidade de Harvard
100,000
para executivos que fizeram
employees, and now
sucesso na
he's at the
carreira e
executive
agora estão
Harvard
focados
program
no
for
impacto social.
executives and
Também
are now
vamos
focusing on
aprender
social impact. And
como
you're
se
going to learn
apresentar melhor.
on how
Um
to
telejornalista
introduce
que
yourself
foi
better from a
âncora do Ben
journalist
TV, então eu
who
estou no lugar
was an anchor at
de
Ben
moderador
TV. So
e
I'll be
ela
the
é uma
moderator
baita
here, and
apresentadora e
she's
moderadora.
a great
Eu sempre
presenter
estou
and
apto,
moderator.
aberto a aprender com
So
os outros. É
I'm
uma boa
open
lição.
to learn from
E também
everyone. So
vamos
that's going to be
entender
a great
melhor como os
lesson to me
esforços,
as well. And I'm going to
as conquistas
learn
e as
how
derrotas, né,
efforts,
fazem parte de
achievements,
qualquer
and
carreira de
defeats
sucesso,
are part of
seja no
every
Brasil, fora do
successful career,
Brasil, ou
either in Brazil,
uma mistura
abroad,
dessas duas coisas.
or
Eu sou Jason
mixing
Diet,
both things. I'm
vice-presidente do
Jason
Global Hub,
Diet. I'm the vice
e Paulo
president of Global
Carvão
Hub.
está junto com a
And
gente.
Paulo
Ele é
Carvão
Senior Fellow
is with
na
us
Advanced
today. He's a
Leadership
senior
Initiative Harvard,
fellow at
engenheiro
Advanced
carioca, né, lá
Leadership of
atrás,
Harvard. He's
e
an engineer
defensor da
from Rio,
diversidade,
and he
pensamento,
defends
perspectiva,
diversity and
formação e experiência.
perspectives
Então,
and
conselheiro
backgrounds
e
and
mentor,
experience. So
e tudo que você
is a
agora
counselor and
deixe de
an
falar,
advisor and a
fique à
mentor, and
vontade,
everything
Paulo,
that I
para
haven't
nos
said,
dizer
you
quando
can
você entra em
tell
ação.
us, Paulo,
A
because I probably
segunda
forgot
pessoa, uma
a
pessoa
lot.
querida, Gisele
The second
Shida,
person is a very dear friend
jornalista,
of mine,
mestre de
Gisele
grandes
Shida.
eventos
She's a
corporativos,
journalist. She's a
cerimônias
master
grandes de eventos
of
corporativos.
MC of
Como eu
large
falei,
corporate events. As
teleapresentadora,
I said,
e eu estava
she's a
falando antes de
TV
entrar agora, ela é uma
presenter. And as we
perfeccionista
were
que
talking before,
sempre
she's a
busca
perfectionist who's
melhorar
always
e também ajudar
trying
os outros.
to
Então eu vi
get
ela
better
dando
and
dicas
help
bem
others. I
valiosas para
saw her
outros
giving very
estudantes da
valuable
Uninter
tips
querendo
to other
entrar
students at
no
Uninter who
jornalismo.
wanted
O
to
formato
get
deste
into
evento, deixa eu
journalism.
parar de falar agora,
And
vou conversar
I'm going
15
to stop
minutos mais ou menos com o
talking. I'm going to
Paulo, uma
talk for
conversa. Eu
15
mando
minutes
ele responder uma série de
with Paulo
perguntas
one-on-one.
depois.
He's going to answer
Isso vai
several
ser em
questions,
inglês.
and then
Então é
that's going to be in
importante a gente
English.
ter essas
So it's
misturas. O
important to
Paulo
have
tem feito uma parte da
this
carreira dele fora do
exchange.
Brasil.
Paulo had
Aí eu
most
vou
of his
voltar para o
career
português
outside
e
of
converso
Brazil.
com
Then
a
I'll go back
Gisele,
to
que também
Portuguese
fala inglês muito
and
bem.
talk to Gisele, who's also speak very good English.
Finalmente, a gente entra
And
numa mesa redonda.
finally,
E essa mesa
we are
redonda
going to
vai
get
durar
into a
por
round
volta de
table, and this
segundo. A
round
gente
table
está
will be
transmitindo
around
este evento
25
por dois
minutes. We are
canais. Então, o
broadcasting
canal
this
principal
event
da Uninter
through
está
two
transmitindo em
channels,
português
Uninter
também.
main
Tem um
channel
canal com
in
link na
Portuguese,
descrição
and you
do
have a
YouTube
channel
para a versão
on our
transmitida,
YouTube
transmitido
link
em
for
inglês. Então,
the
fiquem à
English
vontade para
version
trocar
of
umas
this
questões
conversation.
conosco
So
conforme
feel
a mesa.
free to
E com
switch
isso,
back and
é um grande
forth,
prazer dar as boas-vindas ao Paulo.
and it's
Paulo, eu
the
já vou
pleasure to
começar
welcome
com a
Paula.
pergunta do
Paula, I'm gonna
intermitente.
ask you
Então,
a question to
trocando
keep
para o
the,
inglês. Paulo, it's a pleasure to have you here with us.
the show
And I
running.
was hoping that you could share a key moment in your career when you were faced with the challenge of quickly growing revenue. I knew you did a lot of growing business units, business lines. What strategies did you put into place to grow?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, thank you very much for the invitation. It's great to be here with you and Gisele and everybody else from Uninter and the Global Hub. It's funny to be talking to an audience primarily in Brazil in English, but you guys will have a chance to hear my Portuguese whenever we're all back together. So the I think one of the key moments in my career was actually my last job in Brazil. As you mentioned, I've been here since the kind of the mid '90s, so this was towards the mid and late '90s. I was leading the PC division, personal computers division for IBM in Brazil. IBM back then was still in the personal computing business, and when I arrived there, we were in bad shape, right? We're First, we were, if I remember correctly, number 7 in the market. We were losing money. We had all sorts of issues. And I had a mission to try and turn that business around. It was operating as a separate company. I needed to integrate it back into IBM and hopefully get back to making money and growing the business. And on one hand, was one of the most challenging moments in my career. On the other hand, it was really the most rewarding and one of the ones in which I learned the most. And you ask, what were the strategies that I used to go and kind of turn that business around? I'd say it's been all about the people, right? And this is why it became such a rewarding moment. Is I had to bring a new team in place, get everybody behind a common goal, and together we did it. And after that, two things happened. One is we became really, really, really very good friends. So everybody, was very friendly with each other. And what is most rewarding is I saw all of them grow into kind of leadership and executive positions in their careers, right? So it was really kind of about the team and getting everybody together after a common goal. And well,
Great.
the end of the story is we did well.
That's great. So it sounds like it's all about the people. So what are the critical qualities or skills that you look for when you're selecting team members? When you've got those aggressive targets or you've got a challenge that you've got to take on, who do you want next to you, and what skills and talents do you look for?
Yeah. Well, it depends a little bit on the area, but typically you would look for some track record of success. Granted, sometimes you're investing on new talent. But for sales roles, it's very important to have a great ability to listen. Sometimes you confuse selling with talking, right? As a matter of fact, I think you need to listen more than you talk. There's a saying that says that's why you've been made with the 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? And the other one is selling is a team sport. So it's you need to look for the ability of people working well together in teams. So if possible, a track record of success, very good listener, and a great team player.
So could you talk a little bit about different cultural backgrounds? So obviously you left Brazil, went to the US, built your career there, and did a lot in terms of sales and building those teams. Can you give an example of a cultural influence that came into play, during sales or negotiations, or if there are different strategies in different locations or things that work well that you've noticed over your career?
Yeah. I'll mention something specifically, but even before that, I wanted to say something is one thing that benefited me tremendously when I arrived here is I had a lot of experience. And the reason why I had a lot of experience is, given some of the limitations that we had in Brazil, I had to take over a lot of responsibility very early in my career. And I had really more of a general management set of skills. I had an opportunity to operate in different areas of the business, while people at my age and stage in the company here in the United States, which was a much larger business, they had always been in a given area, right? So people had reached the same kind of levels in the company that I had, but only having had an experience in sales, for example, while I had managed multiple areas of the business. So that experience offset some of the lack of social capital that I had at that point in time, right? In terms of kind of interesting cultural differences, this is something that I'll never forget, and it was a great mentor and friend of mine that at that point in time was my boss. And one day he called me and said, "Paulo, you're really annoying me." And I was kind of surprised by that. But I knew that he meant well because it was somebody that really supported me. And he was explaining the difference between an Anglo-Saxon mind and a Latin mind in terms of how you express yourself and how sometimes you're a little bit more direct and how you answer questions. And he was saying, as an Anglo-Saxon, he's American, he said, if I ask you a question, I just want a direct answer. I do not want a long explanation on how you got to that answer. And typically, this happens in an Anglo-Saxon environment. In a Latin environment, in our culture, typically we build towards an answer. We explain how we got there, and sometimes it's even considered a little abrupt or not polite to be overly direct, right? And without knowing this cultural framework and the cultural context, this can impair communication because you can annoy, as I was annoying an Anglo-Saxon for being like very verbose and explaining everything before I got to an answer. And on the other hand, the opposite, could happen in Brazil, for example, if you're being very direct without going through a little bit more of an explanation. So this awareness of a cultural context, in this case applied to Anglo-Saxon or Latin cultures, it's very important. But I saw this when I was doing business in China, in Europe, in many other countries. It's always super important to have awareness of the cultural context that surrounds a conversation and a relationship.
Right, that makes a great deal of sense. Could you share an experience that you had when you were successful in motivating a team, and then another one where you weren't successful, where you didn't manage to motivate them?
Yeah, so maybe starting with the negative, so we finish on a higher note. It's I think one of the biggest mistakes that you can make is kind of leaving the team behind. Sometimes you have an aggressive target, you have an aggressive goal, you have experience, and you feel that you know how to do things, and you start setting the pace and driving hard, and you're not listening as much as you should to the team, and with that, you're kind of missing team dynamics and things that are happening. And with that, you kind of leave the team behind, or the team leaves you behind, right? So I think this is one of, and I have had issues with this in the past, and it's something that I think everybody should be very, very, pay a lot of attention to, right? To always be together with the team and make sure that you're investing as much time in looking, laterally, looking to your team, nurturing your team, and checking with them, checking with each other to make sure that everybody is kind of together. And then going back to that example of success that I mentioned in the very beginning, one of the things that I said is that having everybody together with the same context and the same shared goals, this is on the positive side is almost like the flip side of it, right? If you are able to establish a shared context in which everybody has a clear understanding of the reasons why certain decisions are being made and have a common purpose to try and get to a higher goal, it's magic, right? This is not different than what happens with a soccer team, right? So whenever a soccer team is playing well together, things are magical. And I'm a big Fluminense fan from Rio. We're in horrible shape now, but magic happened last year, and it was a team effort, right? So I think is a good example.
Great. I'm curious, you mentioned someone who was helping you by giving you, feedback. And having mentors over the course of a career is, I think, very important. Could you talk a little bit about what role mentorship has played in your career, both as a mentor and as someone who is the beneficiary of a mentor? How do you find mentors when you need one? And what have you done as a mentor that you think is helpful to people as they learn?
Yeah, I'm not sure there's like a magic recipe for this, and which leads me to maybe the first ingredient that is very important here is a level of chemistry between the two individuals, right? Because a good mentoring relationship can get very deep into not the how you're doing things, but why you're doing things and your feelings, and for that, it's important that you're having a conversation with somebody that not only you trust and that you feel that brings some value to the conversation, but somebody that you're very comfortable with. Now, there is preparation needed also on your side as a mentee, right? As a person who is kind of a receiving mentorship, is you need to be ready to listen and be very open to feedback. Because if you have a good mentor, this mentor is not only going to give you praise, but it will give you some constructive feedback, will tell you things that others maybe are not telling you, and you need to be ready to receive that feedback and also act on this feedback. And the way well, saying use mentors maybe is not the right way of saying it, but the way you can get the most out of this relationship is really having ongoing conversations about this, about your career, not only your career, but also situations. Sometimes you're facing a challenge, you don't know exactly how to act, and you need some advice. It's invaluable to have somebody that it's outside of the circumstance and the area that you are. And the mentors sometimes can also point to new opportunities and can network you to places where you do not have the right networking. And as I said, also sometimes course correct you, right? And say, hey, Paulo, you're annoying me. Let me help you with context in an international conversation and things like that, right? So that's some of the thoughts on this.
So I'm curious. I had the chance to go to a respected business school, and one of the things I sort of reflect on is I don't remember a single class on sales. And as far as I know, every CEO out there needs to have some role in sales, whether it's getting people on the team. So my question here is, what are the most important skills for an effective sales team leader that is generally not taught in schools or universities?
Yeah, I mentioned one of them, which is this, listening more than talking, right? This is, I think, is important, and especially if you're inexperienced at the beginning of your career, if you're anxious in a situation, there's always a tendency to talk, right, and fill empty spaces. But silence sometimes is super important. It's important to learn how to read the room, and you do this by listening more than talking. So I would say that's one of the kind of magic tricks that are not necessarily taught. The other one is discipline. Sometimes people associate selling with like the art of selling, that you need to be born as a seller, and this is something that's some people are born as with that gift or not. But the reality is there's a process, right? There are ways of doing things, and it requires discipline, as in most crafts, right? Most professions. You need to work on it, you need to practice, you need to be disciplined, you need to prepare yourself. And yes, also going back to the soccer example, sometimes improvisation is important, right? But I would stay with these: listen more than talk, and be a disciplined professional.
Great. So I'm going to give you one last question before we switch back to Portuguese and I talk to Gisele. And it's around technical skills versus other types of skills, and how you've invested your time over your career in learning. You're a lifetime learner, you said. So I'm just curious if you could reflect on that learning journey that you're still on.
Yeah. You made a very important point, which is, learning never ends, right? And never stops. And if we were to contrast, technical skills versus like relationship and others, I spent my career in the technology business. The technology business is a technical business, and it is also a business that moves and changes very quickly and very often. So being constantly on top of the latest technology is like mandatory, otherwise you're irrelevant. And the worst thing that you can do as a professional is to waste your client's time, right? So you need to be up to date, and therefore you do need to keep your technical chops, and you will need to invest on that. Now, at the same time, And more as you grow and the higher you grow, you also need to invest on relationships. The relationships not only with your clients and customers, that can be lifelong relationships. The industry can be a large industry, but sometimes I say it's a large, small world, because we end up bumping into each other constantly, and sometimes you develop a relationship at the moment in your career, and you bump into the person again 5 years later. You both are in different roles, but that's an important relationship. There are relationships also that are important with your business partners, within the company that you operate, with competitors. So, and these become more and more important as you leave more technically oriented, lower level roles and assume more and more higher, executive roles. But I would say, given, especially in the technology industry, I'd say it's almost a 50-50. You need to have a little bit of both. Sometimes we used to call these T-shaped skills, right? In which you need to have a lot of horizontal skills, but also you need to be a specialist in a given area. So it's unfortunately, I think you need to invest on both.
Muito obrigado, Paulo. Um prazer poder conversar neste primeiro bloco. Agora eu passo.
Thank you so much, Paulo. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to you now. I'm going to pass the floor to Gisele, and we'll be back together for Q&A. But before the first question to Gisele, I'd like to thank the questions that are starting to appear in our chat, and I'd like to encourage you to do that. So be sure they're going to try to answer as many questions as possible. So if you wrote a question, don't need to write it again. Feel free, and just know that there are some questions and then you forget, so write it down. You can send it at any time. Gisele, welcome, and I'll start again with a question. And preparation for an interview is very important, for sure, right? But sometimes it's undervalued, right? Oh, I don't need to get ready. So can you tell us a little bit, about an interview, but you were ready to lose everything. Everything was going to go wrong. But then because you got prepared, everything went well. So I think you are on mute, Gisele. Gisele, you are on mute.
Olá, casa de ferreiro, espeto de pau, né?
Yeah, it's always like that.
Boa noite, Jason. Boa noite, Paulo.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Jason, Paulo, everyone. Well, to lose my bearings, because I've always wrote on live news, things happen without any notice. So things are always out there. But let me tell you how I put things back together. Getting ready to an interview is always very, very important. Not always I had time to do so, but I had a team to support me with that. People say that journalists are not someone who knows about everything, but journalists are people who knows everything. So as Paulo said, having this learning is very important. Sometimes things happen without you expecting, and you learn the way. So sometimes you can get ready. So we have to learn as much as I can about a topic, about the interviewee, and about the audience gonna watch us. For example, today I imagine that is an audience of Uninter students. It could be people from abroad, but people interested in what we can learn, in the sense that we have already had some experience in the area. And getting ready means a couple of things. Science is our ally in most of the preparation that we have. Data is very important. So I'm going to interview someone today. People, believe you me, people lie to us live. And most of the time, when we cannot leave the information carry on. So it's important for us to talk about something, because if the person lies, we can show data, confront data with what the people are saying. So, like, I'm going to interview an artist.
Provavelmente não preciso confrontar coisas.
Probably I don't need to confront them with anyone, but I need to welcome them more and get to know about their work. So people, okay, how did you choose the name of your band? It started in the 80s. He has answered it 100 times. Don't ask the obvious. Know the obvious. So you can have you can know what is new. So in your question, you can also introduce people. Okay, this person is so well known, what you know, and then so what is new that you can show people and tell people something that they want to know and nobody ever told them. So and what they call the scoop, and then you can get people about something new, because on the internet today it's pretty easy. You just go and so on and so forth. So I think that's it. Being ready to lead the interview the best way possible and confront depending on the situation. But forget the obvious, know the obvious. And again, knowing everything that you knew before, try to make the be careful not to try to talk more than the person being interviewed. Sometimes people, the interviewer seems to know it all, and sometimes I don't feel very comfortable in this role of being interviewed here. I say it's something that Gisele does well. Maybe I'm going to learn something new here. So perfect. Paulo, and you talking about the importance of listening. It's very easy to say, very difficult to do. So controlling anxiety. You've given some tips about that, but sometimes it's easy to say, easier said than done. But do you have any example when you allow anxiety to take over and manage to recover, and another one that didn't? And if you have any tip on how to get control back to you. When I lost control internally, it's the first time I was in national news. Vignette, I started speaking, and there are possible millions of people watching me. When I realized that, I wanted to run, run, run. So I presented the whole block. I was the anchor, and I was like, don't run, don't run, don't run. And I was kept saying, kept saying, kept saying. I was sure that it was awful. I imagined it was awful, people realizing how anxious I was, but people didn't realize. Usually they don't. That the people don't notice that you have a volcano inside us, that we are sweating, we are trembling, our hands are shaking. Usually people don't realize that. So at the end of the day, I was nervous, but everything was all right. From another anchor, that the vignette came, and there was an empty chair. This anchor actually ran. That happened. And then he became an excellent anchor, but that happens. I managed to really keep my cool. Is every time I needed to say something important. It was almost I almost cried when I saw the tsunami in Japan. I had to watch the images live and control my emotions. It was really hard to do that and talk at the same time. But usually when we are nervous, what I try to say is, you're going to be scared. If you're scared, carry on, because people don't know what's happening inside you. We never know what's going on inside some other person's, as nobody knows what's going on inside us. All our chemical reactions, questions, and insecurities. If you know what to say, you know what we have to deliver. Usually you're going to interview someone, it's live. You cannot repeat yourself because you have guests and the time of this person is precious. So you have to remember that the audience doesn't know that we are feeling everything that we are feeling. If you are scared, go ahead, doesn't matter. What's the best way to deal with the type of question that you said, like evasive question, evasive answer to your question, or long answers? And how do you deal with those two challenges? The evasive person, you ask again, but I asked you this. Do you remember, you try to remind the person that the question was something else. You avoid people being evasive when you ask few questions at once. If you ask like 5 questions at once, people will forget that. But if you're more straightforward, it happens. It happens with politicians a lot. Yeah, but I asked about that, and they answer. But if they keep stretching the answer, you can use your body expression. Pretend that you're going to interrupt or try to ask again, and then you say, okay, interesting. So then, and you kind of interfere very shortly. That doesn't happen. Then you interfere and said, okay, you're talking about that, by the way. And then you try to drive to where you want to go. There are topics that you need to explain, but others don't. And our time is very precious. The other person and the audience's time, so we have to respect that. And another technique is let the person know how long time you're going to have. Just like you said, listen, you have 15 minutes, a little bit more or less, but we control our times. Okay, we are running out of time, so let's move on. Okay, we are not used to being direct in Brazil, but we tend to use this assertiveness that we've learned. Paying attention to the advisory that you did in the past, you have a very good video that helped many students who want to know how to present. I recommend to all of you to watch. But one of your advisories to keep an open attitude. People who are afraid of talking, of course, I froze, I freeze, I don't know what to say. How you get this confidence? You said it the first time you are in front of millions of people. What was happening inside? Okay, now, what do you suggest to these people who are listening to you right now and say, I need to project a very confident attitude? First, people watching don't know. I mean, actually, they know what happened. Okay. Oh, I started sweating. My hands are sweating. I'm shaking. I feel it right now. I'm feeling it right now. I told them before we start that I was really anxious, and that happens. So before, you need to remember that it happens to everyone, not only with you and me, or okay, it happened to me, it's more important than it's more important because it happened to me, right? But you have to remember that that's natural. Again, breathe, because we forget to breathe when that happens. And thirdly, remember that we know what you're talking about. And if you are in this position, it's not for nothing if they called you to interview someone. If you have this position of authority, quote unquote, to bring this information to people, that means that yes, you can do it. So breathe, breathe. And sometimes we have to repeat ourselves that we are confident. We are confident. Oh, I was really, sometimes someone goes through a bad experience and never forgets it. But you have to remember that it happened, but You can learn from that. So to make the other person confident, you have to have a confident image for your attitude, your posture. Sometimes everything talks through the brain. For some, you have a confidence and body language or your attitude. You smile, something happens to your mind, and then you become happy. You have this this behavior. Your brain change. The beginning is like is a challenge, but little by little it happens. Last question to you, and then you're gonna go to a round table. Now you are an MC for a large corporate event. You have clients from different fields. So how do you adapt to different styles of your client, or different events that you are leading without losing your own style? It's like an interview. I try to get to know the client. I try to know my audience and the text that I'm going to read, the presenters or the speakers that are going to be there. They bring a lot of what the client wants, but I cannot lose my own personality. For example, I have a respectful style, but I'm not old-fashioned. I'm nice, but I'm also not that grumpy. You know, I'm not grumpy, but people hire me. They kind of know my style. They know the way I am. And then they're gonna choose me to be their MC. Some are more cool, other are more serious. I try to adapt to the purpose of the event. It's worst thing is for you to be part of an event where you don't feel comfortable, you don't understand what's going on. So the experience as a journalist helped me to make things clear to those who are participating, because we've been there. I don't want to feel how I felt. I wanna charm people. I wanna enchant. For example, someone that is very, very serious, and you want someone to tell a joke. That's not me. But he wants respect with the audience. You want things to be very clear throughout the whole process of the event. Then it's me. So it starts with the hiring. So they know who I am, they need to know who I am, and that's what they are hiring me for, or that's who they are hiring. So, thank you so much, Giselle. Now let's go to the roundtable. We have a student here, George, hi, George Ripsky. He was a global ambassador, so we had weekly conversations. He had a question to Paulo. He wrote in very good English, but I'm going to ask in Portuguese. Paulo, for someone in the beginning of their career in a technology profession in Brazil and want to start a startup, what are the steps they should take? What would be your initial focus, and what should you stop doing to bring investment?
Obrigado pela pergunta.
Very easy. Thank you, George, for your question. To be concise in this question is complicated, but first of all, you must have a good understanding of the problem area you enact. I mean, what are the pains? Your startup needs to add value. So you must have to be very clear in what the value you're going to bring to the table. Secondly, maybe more important than the first one, you need a co-founder, a partner, because to be an entrepreneur is a journey full of bumps, ups and downs, and having someone who is working with you and who's going to bring other knowledges is very important. And a good investor, a good venture capital investor, an angel investor usually assess this maybe more than the technical aspect of the startup. The team of founders, is it a team with with the chemistry, if they are passionate about it? Because it's very easy that the startup starts in a direction and then change course. So start with those two initial steps, and then it's a long journey, it's fundraising, and so on and so forth. Thank you. Now, Aline Gargulho asks us, today, what are the skills that are necessary so that we can have some sort of exposure, better exposure in the company? So Giselle and Paula, and then I have something to say.
Tenho de ligar de novo aqui.
I forgot to turn on. I'm not from the management area, but in any area, you have to start being humble, learning, just like I did.
Aline, né? Acho que a Gisele deu uma aula pra
Aline,
gente, uma coisa
and I
muito
think
importante que
Gisele
você
said something very important, which is
comunicação,
communication.
seja na área de vendas, seja na área
Communication in
administrativa, seja
sales,
na área
management,
profissional de comunicação,
administrative,
é algo
being
super importante. Então,
communication professional is very important.
conhecimento,
So
essas práticas que a Gisele mencionou,
these knowledges and practice that Giselle mentioned are
importantes
very, very
qualquer
important
direção aí que você vai
in
tomar.
wherever you go, in any direction. I would say proactiveness, to be being proactive, because sometimes you're going to have a boss. If you're lucky, you're going to have people working for you, and you need to monitor, not being proactive without understanding what's going on. Because sometimes you can help your company or the person or your team. Oh, I thought about that. Let me see if you need to do this. So being proactive, I think it's something good always. Not start doing things without checking whether if it's interesting or not, but don't stop. If you are in the position to understand better a client or a situation, and someone on the team doesn't have this visibility, you can do that. Tailani asks, okay, I want to have a human resources trainee program or summer job, but I've been an assistant in a daycare. Should I leave that aside? Question is, you have an experience that you think that doesn't fit. Tailani, first of all, remember that you are trying to get an internship. And the idea is to is for it's for you to figure out whether this is an area you want to work. Is the person hiring you is really interested in hiring a trainee or an internship? They're not looking for someone professional or a lot of experience. And on the other hand, if you want to work in human resources, it's important to have relationship with people. And in your experience in a daycare, it's important to say that. What kind of relationship with people I had in a daycare? How did I deal with my supervisors? How did I work with the parents who brought kids to the daycare? When did I feel or did I experience a crisis in a daycare? Everything are experience that can be very valuable. And don't be ashamed. Don't be ashamed.
Então, não sei se, Gisele, você tem alguma coisa a adicionar.
Gisele, do you have anything else to say?
Tô aprendendo com o Paulo aqui, gente. Vamos para a próxima.
I'm learning with Paulo.
Então,
I'm learning with Paulo.
Eu concordo plenamente.
I totally agree
Tailane, uma
what
coisa
Paulo said.
interessante,
Maybe Tailane, something
sabe,
interesting
o
is,
fato de trabalhar em
okay,
creche,
the fact
como
that
Paulo
working in
falou,
a
perdão,
daycare, as
responder
Paulo
muito bem
said,
quando você tá
you
fazendo
shouldn't
estágio.
hide it,
Vamos imaginar
especially
que a
for
indústria
an
não tem nada a
internship.
ver
But
com
let's
qualquer
say
indústria.
that the industry doesn't have
O
anything to
fato de
do with a
sempre
new
chegar,
industry.
por exemplo, essa
But the
pessoa,
fact
trabalho em creche não
that,
tem nada a ver
okay,
com
oh,
esse
but I
tipo de
work in a
indústria.
daycare, it has
Mas o
nothing to
fato
do
de
with the
você
other
sempre
industry.
chegar
But the
na hora
fact
e
that you
nunca
are always
faltar,
on time,
né?
You never miss a day of work. That is important. Reliability is something that people need. You can show that you were an extremely reliable and dependable employee. So you can look at the experience from this side, not what I did, but the way I did it. And sometimes things are difficult to see on paper, but if you can say, okay, in 1,513 days, I never missed a day of work. It may sound like commonplace, but it makes a difference. Larissa asked a couple of questions, Larissa Andrade, and they have to do with the role in technology. Can you integrate technology in strategic partnerships to make your business grow? And again, what is the importance of technology in the career of young students today? Technology and career, Paulo, maybe you can take this question. How to update in your career, how you do that in your personal life, and how do you guide an organization for them to adapt? Technology is more and more part of the business and part of our lives, not only as people or individuals, but also as corporations. So this border is getting thinner and thinner. And like today, nobody asks how to use electricity in your business. You use power as a tool in our lives, and technology is pretty much or getting there, right? So that's the first thing to say. So you don't necessarily need to be in the technology business so that technology is a central part of your business. A bank today is a technology company. Communication company is a technology company, and so on and so forth. Now, going back to how you can get up to date in terms of technology, using technology, reading about technology, and in your daily activities, use technology. An example that is very trendy today is AI, and AI specifically in generative AI, ChatGPT, and so on. That started with people. Now companies are trying to incorporate that in their business. So that's a great example of how this border is getting is disappearing, really. So we have a question from Wayne Goyes, who writes English pretty well, but the translation is there anything that you have done different in your career, for both of you?
Pergunta difícil, hein? Noemi?
Difficult question, right? Noeli, very difficult question. Paulo, want to start? Well, first of all, I keep repeating myself, but I try to convince myself that it's true, because I always prefer to look ahead and look back. Looking back is important to learn, to have self-criticism, but we don't need to be that critical. And I'm more concerned about what's going to happen, what I need to do, what's going to be my next step, then revisit my career. And guys, it's difficult, but we started talking like how I had an international career. I lived half of my life here in the US, as I am, half in Brazil. I never planned that. That happened. And of course, I planned to have professional growth, but that wasn't my ambition. I wanted to have more responsibility, to have more impact, of course, make more money, especially in the beginning, and do the best I could. So I think if you keep this focus and right now be the best I can and get ready for my next steps. I think it's even more important than revisiting the past, because you cannot change the past. We can learn with the
Eu
past.
faço minhas todas as palavras do Paulo e eu
I'm
penso o seguinte, eu não
totally
faria
agree.
tudo igual,
I
porque
wouldn't
hoje eu
do
sei coisas que eu
everything
não
the same,
sabia
because
20
today I
anos atrás,
know
que eu não
things that I
sabia 10
didn't know
anos
20
atrás,
years
que
ago
eu não
or
sabia
10 years
ontem,
ago.
né? Que eu não sabia meia
Yeah, I
hora
didn't know
atrás, eu ainda
yesterday
muita
or
coisa
half
que eu
an hour
aprendi
ago.
hoje. Então, assim,
I've been
claro que eu
learning
não
a lot
faria
here today.
tudo igual,
Of
não faria
course,
tudo de novo
I wouldn't do
igual,
everything the
sabendo o que
same,
eu sei hoje.
knowing
Sabendo
what I
que
know
hoje eu estou fazendo,
today.
como o Paulo falou,
Knowing what I know
adaptavelmente, né?
today,
Eu acho que é para frente a
I'm
gente erra, no
working
passado a gente se
from now
perdoa
on.
ou perdoa os outros, porque a gente não pode
We
mudar,
forgive our
mas
past
olha
or
para frente
forgive
e usa tudo que
others
aprendeu
because
de
we
novo.
cannot change. We can try to learn from everything that we get. If you learn with our mistakes are part of our path, of our journey. So there are times where we learn a lot, not when we do things right, but when we make mistakes. If you change it to avoid a mistake, maybe you wouldn't have learned where the opportunity, that certain opportunity have brought us. Totally agree with you. Just to, before passing the, well, asking the other question, of course I would change things, but what I could replicate is passion. When you feel that you're not passionate anymore for what you do, that's a sign. Of course, it's not every day that's gonna be awesome, but if you spend 1 month, 2 months with no encouragement, no passion, very unlikely you're gonna progress in the career. So that happened once in my career. I was in a situation that wasn't the best. I wasn't motivated for that reason. And if I can take a step back, of course I would change it faster. But no passion, try to get further. And if you feel that this passion is not there anymore, so try to adjust that. Specific question to Giselle, Larissa Andrade, perfect English. She asked regarding communication sector, the education industry is going through different, too many changes, platform, podcasts, and the traditional mainstream journalism has been changing, the narratives are changing. How to adapt?
Aprendizado contínuo. Se a gente
Continuous
se
learning.
prender ao que sempre foi, a gente
If
só
you
faz mercado,
keep,
né? Então,
if you get stuck to what it has always been, you're going to get out of the market. I mean, you have to look at the future all the time, because the future is today.
A gente pensa em TV 3.0.
We have this TV 3.0. All the vehicles are changing. Paulo understands a lot about AI. How are you going to deal with deep fake? Today I saw Paulo's Instagram. It was his avatar speaking. I don't know if you're going to need a presenter in the future. I might have to find my plan B, C, D. Maybe what I've learned today, maybe next year I'm not going to use anymore. Continuous learning is very important.
Concordo mais uma vez com o Paulo.
Totally agree with Paulo again.
Joel
Souza wants to know how to get ready for an interview. Is there a difference between an online interview and in-person live interview on how to get ready? Yes. Yes. I think that when you are in person with the person, you have the possibility of having better contact with a person before starting an interview. Even when I'm an MC, I'm gonna call the speaker. I like to talk to the person beforehand. Maybe not about the topic of the interview. It's interesting to do that, but it's interesting to talk about life, about the weather, about family, anything, so that this person can have some sort of a relationship with you before we start the interview, to have this empathy, some sort of closeness. On the internet, that's not possible. I mean, not that much. I mean, you have cameras, but it's not the same. So you can try to get a little bit beforehand so you can feel more comfortable. And maybe you're not going to talk about the topic you're going to discuss, but you can talk about anything. Peanuts, like you say. Talk about anything, no problem. But this closeness is interesting. Now, following what Gisela said, I think it has to do with any interaction online, not only interviews.
Ver esse body language, né? O
This
gestual
body
da pessoa é
language,
muito mais difícil
uh,
você
it's
sentir
different. It's
no
more
ombro,
difficult to
as
feel
pausas
when somebody
são
is
muito
not
mais
feeling
complicadas online, né? Se você
comfortable.
está ao
Pauses are more
vivo,
complicated
é
online. If
fácil
you're
você
live
deixar uma pausa de
in
5 segundos
person,
ocorrer. 5
it's
segundos
easy
parece
to
que
leave. I mean, 5
pouco
seconds.
tempo. Conta 5 segundos
Uh,
online, é uma
count
eternidade, né?
5
Então
seconds online, and that's an
tem nuances
eternity.
realmente diferentes.
So
E aí,
there's
voltando,
some
Gisele, uma coisa que você falou muito, é a
subtleness
preparação
there. And
realmente. A
just there's something that
preparação
is
é o
such
mais importante
getting ready,
quando você está online,
preparedness.
porque
I think
não
that's
tem
very
todas
important when you are online because you
essas
don't
outras
have these
nuances que você precisa
other
agregar, né?
uh,
Exatamente.
possibilities that you
A
can
linguagem corporal fica
tackle.
daqui para cima, então é muito verbal
The
que
body
acontece.
language is from here
Você vai ter
up,
uma
so
leitura
everything's
anterior,
very
você
verbal.
não
You
vê
cannot
exatamente
actually
como
read the
uma
person.
pessoa
You
para
don't see
tomar
how they are
como
wearing,
falou agora.
how they behave,
Então,
how
isso é
they
muito
move.
verbal e a
It's
distância fica
verbal,
maior. Então, a
period.
preparação reforça o
So
que Paulo disse.
getting
É
ready
bem importante que você
is
leia um
very
pouquinho
important.
sobre, que você converse um pouquinho.
You have to read a little bit about
Então, a
something. You
próxima
have
pergunta
to
vem
discuss.
do
This
Anderson,
next
Luan
question
da
is from
Silva.
Anderson,
E
Luan da
aqui
Silva.
o centro da pergunta dele é o que é melhor?
And I
Ter
think the center of
muita
his
experiência
question
de
is, what is
trabalho em
better?
uma
A lot of
em
work
determinada
experience
área
in a
ou
certain area,
de trabalhar em
or
diversas áreas
working
diferentes
in
para
different
contratação?
Quem
Gostaria assim,
to
de
getting
começar com o
hired.
Paulo,
So
depois
let's
a
start with
Gisele,
Paulo and then
e
Giselle,
responder a essa pergunta
and
em várias fases da
answering
carreira.
this
Então,
question
para o
in
início da
different
carreira, meio da
stages
carreira,
of your
qual
career, to
a
beginning of your
diferença
career, end of the
entre
career.
profundidade,
Is there any
conhecimento,
difference
tempo em
between
empresa,
depth,
ou
knowledge,
diversidade de
time in a
experiências?
company, or
Assim, ó,
the
quando a gente
diversity of
precisa de escolher uma
experiences?
fase
Okay,
de
let's
carreira,
start
normalmente
with
existe uma
the,
progressão.
the stage that you are in your career. Sometimes there's always a progression where you start
Muito mais técnico
more
no
technical,
sentido geral
in
da
a
palavra.
sense, the more general sense of
Muito
this
mais
word,
especializado numa determinada área.
more
E conforme você
specialized
vai
in a certain
crescendo,
area.
tem muito
And
mais
as you
responsabilidade,
grow,
você tem que se
you get
tornar
more
pouco
responsibility and you have to
mais
become
generalista. Eu acho que isso
a
sim tem
generalist.
pouco dessa
So
dimensão ao longo do tempo.
it's a little bit of
E
this
aí,
I
lembra
mentioned.
aquele comentário que eu sobre
It has to do with
três
time.
skills,
Remember what I
né,
said
conhecimento
about the
que você precisa
skills,
ter, né, que você precisa ser um
the sort of knowledge
generalista,
that
mas
you
que
must have.
precisa
You
ter
need to
uma
be a
área
generalist, but you also
de,
need to
de especialização.
have
E aí,
a
depois,
level
quanto ao
of
tempo em cada
specialization.
função,
So in terms of
eu,
time on a
quando eu
certain
estou
position,
contratando, normalmente eu não
when I'm
contrato
hiring,
pessoas
I
que
don't
mudam
like
muito
people
frequentemente
who
de trabalho.
move
Obviamente, você
or
tem
change work
circunstâncias
very
diversas de
frequently.
vida,
Usually you
profissionais
have
que podem
different
gerar isso, mas eu tento
circumstances in life that
observar
can
alguém que
lead to
tenha
that. But I
uma
try to observe
permaneça
someone
por
who
algum tempo numa
remains
determinada
in a
posição.
certain
E
company or in a
eu até
certain
costumo
position
dizer que
for a
3 anos
while. And I like to
é
say that 3 years
é o período ideal,
is the
porque no
ideal
primeiro ano
time
você não tem a mínima ideia do
because
que você está fazendo,
in the
no
beginning,
segundo
the
ano
first year you
você
don't
já
know
aprendeu o
anything.
trabalho, você está
Uh,
tomando decisões, você
you have
já
to
está
do. Second year,
implementando
you learn the
algumas
work.
coisas, e no
You're
terceiro
starting
ano
to
você está
implement things, and
vivendo
then
a
the third year
consequência do que você
you live with
do que
the
você fez.
consequence of what you
Então,
did.
acho que
So
esse ciclo de 3 anos
I think
se
that this cycle
simplifica
of
quando
3 years
você, como
is an
profissional,
interesting
também
cycle that
se
you as a
desenvolve um pouco
professional
mais. E aí, se você está
can
você
develop
sendo a pessoa que está
develop a little
contratando
bit
esse
more. So if
profissional,
you're the
eu tento
person hiring
ajustar um
this
pouco nisso.
professional, I try. That's
Não
what I'm looking for.
necessariamente experiência em uma empresa só, em uma
Not
só
someone
área,
who has
mas
experience in
também
a
que não seja alguém que tenha uma
company
carreira
only, but
ambulante
not
de
someone
um trabalho
who
para o
has
outro.
been jumping from one job to another all the time.
No jornalismo, quanto
In
mais
journalists,
conhecimento você tem em outras áreas,
the more
habilidades
knowledge you know
são,
about
né,
other areas,
jornalista
the better.
e especialista em relações internacionais. Ou você é
To
jornalista
be
e
an expert
especialista em
in
economia.
special
Esses
relation,
são
international
tipos de
relations or
profissionais que
economics,
eles mudam de
politics,
escopo para o jornalista é muito
sport. So
importante.
expand your
Perfeito. Então, eu
your
vou
knowledge is very
citar uma
interesting.
última pergunta que vem do Jackson
The
Santos.
final question from
Vou dar
Jackson
para
Santos,
vocês e depois vou agradecer para dar tempinho para vocês
and then I'm gonna
refletirem e
thank you
pensarem.
so you
O
can reflect and
pergunta
think.
para Paulo, eu acho que
Jackson
também,
asks Paulo,
Gisele, se você
Paulo,
tiver
I think Giselle, if you
também
have
bem-vindo.
a tip,
Teria
it's
algum
always
livro
welcome.
para indicar
Is there a
para
book
aprimorar
to
a
improve
mentalidade em relação ao desenvolvimento pessoal e
our
profissional?
mindset in
Então,
terms
fazendo
of
tempinho, eu
professional
queria
and
agradecer
personal
muito a
development?
presença
First of all, I'd
tanto
like to
da
thank
Gisele
the presence
quanto da
of
Paula.
Giselle and Paula.
É sempre prazer receber
It's
pessoas
always
de
a pleasure
destaque
to
nas suas
receive
respectivas áreas.
people
E
that are
vamos
great in
fazer,
what they
a partir do
do.
Jackson,
So
a
let
nossa
ask
última
Jackson's
pergunta, mas
question. There's a
eu
final
queria antes
question,
dar
but
meus agradecimentos
before, I'd
profundos
like
para
to
vocês
thank
dois, para
you,
gastarem seu tempo conosco
deeply thank you,
dividir seu
the time that you
conhecimento.
spent with us today and shared
Paulo, e depois
your
Gisele,
knowledge
por
with
favor,
us. Paulo and
uma
then
palavra de
Giselle.
sugestão de livro.
Book suggestion?
Perfeito, bom. Primeiro, eu que retorno o
Jason,
agradecimento, é um prazer
I'd
enorme
like to
estar com
thank
todos
you.
aqui.
It's a pleasure to be
E
with you all
Jackson,
here. And Jackson,
meu Deus, eu leio
the
muito,
book,
então tem
I
muito
read a
tempo para
lot.
escolher um livro.
So
Talvez
it's very
seja justo
difficult to
já
pick a single
falar
book,
em dois livros
but
recentes. Um que eu
that's why I'm
estou
going to
lendo
talk a
agora,
very recent book. One that
eu
I'm
gosto muito
reading
de
now.
biografias, eu estou
I
lendo,
like
não
autobiography. I'm
biografias
reading,
de uma forma geral.
oh, I'm
Eu
not
estou lendo uma
autobiography,
biografia do John
biographies as a whole.
Adams,
I'm
que
reading the
foi
biography of John Adams,
dos
who
founding
was
fathers aqui dos
one of the
Estados
founding
Unidos, foi
fathers
presidente dos
of the
Estados Unidos,
US.
segundo
He
presidente
was
dos Estados
the
Unidos,
second
uma carreira
president
muito
of the
grande,
US,
muito
had a
interessante
long
as
career.
lições de
Very
vida
interesting the
eh,
life lessons
dele tendo que
that
tomar decisões
he
numa área
brings
totalmente
us,
nova. Eles estavam
having to
criando um
make a
país
decision in a
que era
different
os
area,
Estados
like they
Unidos.
were creating
E
a
uma outra
country, the US.
biografia
And the other
também um pouco
biography,
na área de tecnologia e ciência
in
social ao
terms of
mesmo tempo,
in technology and social
eh,
sciences,
de uma professora do
was the
MIT que se chama
biography
Sherry
of an
Turkle.
MIT
Eu
teacher
vou
called
até me
Sherry
lembrar, quando a
Turtle.
Gisele,
I
depois da
can't
Gisele
remember her name.
falar, eu vou me lembrar do
After
nome
Giselle said,
do livro,
I'm gonna
mas é o livro de memórias
remember the name of her
motivacionais.
book.
São acho que
It's a
eu lembro
memory
mais
book,
sobre a ótica da
the book of
experiência das
memories of
pessoas do
Sherry
que
Turtle. So
algo
it's
mais
about the
técnico que
experience of
você
people
aprender com a
than
experiência.
anything really technical.
E
You
de
have to
novo,
learn
muito
with the
obrigado, Jason,
experience.
pelo
And
convite.
again, thank you so
Prazer
much,
enorme
Jason,
estar
for the
aqui com você.
invitation. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Olha, eu
Aí
levei muita
me
sorte.
lembrei, perdão, Gisele, me lembrei do nome do livro.
Imagina.
Oh, I
Ah,
remember the name of the book.
The Empathy Diaries, os Diários da
The Empathy
Empatia.
Diaries. The Empathy Diaries.
Muito bom, eu levei muita sorte,
Very
porque
good.
pela pergunta, eu
Um,
estou no meu quarto,
I,
do lado
I'm at
do
home.
armário
I'm in
dos
my
livros que
bedroom,
eu estou
close
lendo.
to where
Então,
the
aqui,
books
ó,
that
uma
I've
que tem
been
muito a
reading.
ver com o que o
So
Paulo
there are
falou,
things that
o
have a lot to
culture
do
map
with what
para
you,
você,
Paulo,
da Erin Meyer,
said, the culture
e
map
para você
by
ler no
Erin
meu
Meyer,
papel, opa,
so that
das
you can
diferenças
learn
culturais na hora de se
a little bit about
comunicar, ó, aqui, ó,
cultural
e
difference
fazer
to
negócios,
communicate,
enfim, você entendeu um
make
pouquinho das
business, do
culturas
business,
ao
and
redor do mundo para
how
poder se
people work
comunicar com as
around the
pessoas.
world, so you can
Aqui
communicate with
também,
them. And here
esse
you have
aqui, esse dele tem um filósofo
this is
coreano, cadê?
a Korean
Esse filósofo
philosopher.
coreano, já vou deixar aqui para vocês olharem como se escreve, porque se eu falar,
Is the
vocês não vão
Society
saber o
of
meu nome.
Tiredness.
Então, ele tem vários
That's the
livros, A
name.
Sociedade do
He has
Cansaço,
many
esse aqui
books.
é sobre o
This is
cansaço,
the
vários.
Society of Tiredness. He has many.
Esse aqui que vocês já devem ter
This
ouvido
one you
falar
probably
sobre,
heard.
Sapiens,
A Brief History of Humanity, Sapiens,
para entender melhor,
and
ou
to
para
understand a
entender
little
a
bit
mulher
more
do
about
presente, do
women
futuro, Bell Hooks.
in the
Esse
present,
livro
the
tem vários
future
outros.
bell hooks.
Eu
This
agradeço a
book are
todos,
in many others. So thank you so
troca de
much
conhecimento,
for being here,
informação, e é uma
in
honra
in
enorme
thirsty for
estar
knowledge,
acreditando
and
que eu
it's
conheço
it's really an
dois
honor to be
gigantes,
here
Paulo
with these
Carvão
two
e o Jason. Depois tem uma
great
procurada
people,
bem legal
Paulo
para
Carvalho and
conhecer, para vocês que
Jason.
não conhecem o Jason
I
ainda. Ele foi
If you don't
super
know
humilde
Jason,
na
I mean, I'm really
apresentação, mas
humble
é um
to
gigante.
be
Depois dê uma
here.
olhadinha
Really, they are
na
gigantic.
internet. Paulo também foi super modesto,
Paulo,
outro
he
gigante.
was way
É uma
too
honra estar
humble.
aqui
He's
com
a
vocês
giant as
hoje
well. So it's a
e
pleasure and
agradeço a
honor to be
oportunidade
here today.
de
So
falar com
thank you for the
todos. Então, e
opportunity.
Jason, você
And
falou que
Jason,
o meu papel é esse,
you
você
said
fez
that it
perfeitamente,
was
fez
my
excelente.
role You
Parabéns,
did
obrigada a todos
it
vocês.
perfectly.
Bom, muito obrigado,
Excellent.
então, Jackson.
Congratulations. Thank you,
Viagem é um
guys.
livrozinho
Jackson,
pequenininho,
my
né, que
tip is a very
eu
tiny book
luto com o que o Paulo falou
that
da
I
brevidade.
fight
Então,
with what Paulo
o nome
said.
do livro é What
It's
is Your One
briefness. The
Sentence?
book is
Que quer
What's
dizer,
Your One
qual que é
Sentence?
sua única frase?
What is
Então, o
your one
livro é bem
sentence?
sucinto, mas em relação
So
a
it's a
como
very
você coloca
uh,
em uma frase só,
succinct book. And
para a
how do
pessoa se
you
lembrar de você,
put yourself
para você saber se
in one single
expressar em
sentence so
algo
that people can
delongando
remember you?
numa frase.
How can
E
you
a autora
express
é
in
Mimi
one
Goss,
single
que é
sentence?
professora da
And the
Harvard
author,
Kennedy
Mimi
School.
Goss, is a
Então, ela
professor
faz
at
algumas
Harvard
anotações.
Kennedy
Tá,
School, and
viu?
I think it
Muito
was very
obrigado,
interesting.
Paulo.
So
Muito
thank you so
obrigado,
much, Paulo. Thank you.
Gisele. Foi um prazer
Thank you,
estar
Giselle.
aqui
It
com
was a
vocês, a
pleasure to be
plateia.
here with
E
all of
até a
you
próxima.
and
Boa
the
noite a
audience,
todos.
and see you soon. Bye bye.
Boa noite.